Now, welcome everybody to Bridge Gardens and Long Island Grown. You know, I must confess that I'm a bit amazed that after 6 years, Long Island Grown is still going strong. I guess it just shows how much support there is for local food on Long Island out there. And isn't that wonderful for all of us, really? So thank you for your support for Long Island Grown and for Bridge Gardens and Peconic Land Trust and for the producers of our local food. I'm sure they appreciate it too. Let me introduce today's panel. I have Jennilee Morris from Grace and Grit Restaurant, Allissa Goodale from Borghese Vineyards, and Frank Trentecost from Boomy Farm. Got it. Thank you all for being here today. So really appreciate it. And of course, you know Laura Donnelly, besides being an accomplished pastry chef and contributor to the Barefoot Contessa program and cookbooks. Laura is the food editor for the East Hampton Star. And thank you for all you do and for being such a fabulous moderator.
I could come and watch.
And thanks to Land Trust staff for organizing and advertising and doing all they do for this series. Kathy Kennedy, Yvette DeBow, Pam Green, Autumn Rose. I really appreciate their help. And also our volunteers, Carol Ehlers, Bobby Cohen, and Jeffrey Wells, our intrepid videographer. So, and let's not forget Peconic Land Trust for all the good work that it does, and without whom we wouldn't be here. So a big thanks to John and John Halsey, who's here, and everybody at Peconic Land Trust. So thank you all for joining us today. I'll see you back here on Sunday, April 28th for the last of this year's Long Island Grown. And now I'll turn it over to Laura.
Thank you, Britt. Thank you all for coming, and especially you all for coming and taking time away from your busy days. So I'm going to go in order and ask each of you, Jennilee, starting with you, explain how you got to where you are with Grace and Grit, like literally, and then Allissa and Frank down the line. Just, brief introduction about, where you're from and what you do.
Sure. So I've been in the restaurant industry for a long time. I started actually on the South Fork in East Quogue, working at Doctor's Waterside, which was known as boot camp in my day. I started off as a dessert girl making cappuccinos, and eventually a few years, 6 years later, I wound up at Love Lane Kitchen in Mattituck. I was the opening general manager there. 6 years after that, I opened my own restaurant. It was called Bonnie Jean's Casual American Eatery in Southold. I sold that and opened up a coffee shop next door called Northport Roasting Company. And then across the street, opened a commissary for Grace and Grit, which is actually an off-premise catering company. And we do weddings and small parties, big parties. We started a smoker program. And this year we'll be doing a food truck. So it's coffee and cooking, lots of caffeine.
Thank you. Allissa?
Hello, everyone. I started working in the wine industry in 2011. I graduated college and needed a job on the North Fork. I moved back home and started working in the tasting room at Martha Flower Vineyards. And while I was there, the winemaker at the time, Juan Michele Martinez, was really helpful in promoting wine information sessions and winemaking on Long Island, taking the staff of tours of Premium Wine Group, which is a custom crush winemaking facility in Mattituck. And when I first saw Premium, I was in awe of the space, and I was like, I want to work there. So I started working on the bottling line in 2014 and really enjoyed working in production and winemaking. So I worked my first harvest in 2014 in the fall. And once I worked a harvest, I realized that there's a whole community of traveling winemakers between the northern and the southern hemisphere. So I, in 2015, worked in New Zealand for 3.5 months. I came back with experience. I was really lucky because my boss at the time let me leave for 3 months with a full-time job to come home to. And then I became the lab assistant, started working in a vineyard with the vineyard manager at Martha Clara. In 2017, I lived and worked in southwestern Australia for 5 months in the Margaret River region. And when I came home about a year ago, Borghese Vineyard approached me asking if I would become the cellar manager there. So now I am the production winemaker, meaning that I get to implement all the winemaking techniques and then also make sure everything is running smoothly in the vineyard. Yeah.
Hey, I am, they call me Farmer Frank out here. My name is Frank Trenicas. I've been farming since 2013. Prior to farming, I was in finance, so it seems like a disconnect, but it worked for me at the time, continues to work for me. I actually got my start at, as a Quail Hill CSA member, just picking the vegetables, going twice a week really seemed like a poetic experience for me, something that really hit home. My first 2 years or 3 years were in the Pisacano Land Trust New Farmer program. Then I went out on my own. I picked up 10 acres, 6 acres, kind of grew the farm, grew the business, and then the more I learned about farming, the more specifically I want to grow, more nutrient density. I switched the farm to a nonprofit. I use the farm as a conduit of wealth, so people that could afford it pay a little more. We take all our extra produce, or not even our extra produce, we take half the farm and donate it to a food pantry in the city. The food quality that they had at the pantry was terrible. It's all canned beans, canned corn, onions. And it seemed like there was a huge disparity in terms of what was available out here and what people could afford, and we were trying to shrink that disparity. So that's what our farm does now. We have small acreage in East Hampton, and we have some more acreage here in Sagaponic.
Excellent. I didn't know about all the acreage. Excellent. So Jennilee, you, when we spoke the other day, mentioned that you really grew up with an entrepreneurial spirit in the family, and your grandfather had a restaurant, and your uncle and cousins, catering halls. Do they offer you advice, and do you take it?
Is this being filmed?
Yes, it's live streaming on Facebook and being filmed. So, no curse words.
Yeah.
Yeah, they might
No.
be watching. They might be watching.
Actually, I'm really lucky to have a history where my grandfather's not with us anymore, so I just have the memory and photos and just hearing stories from my family. But for years, it always really came up around Christmas Eve. We have a big Christmas Eve at my house, so it's all of the Italians are around the same table, and we're, and we do lobster, and it's really funny because my cousins and my uncle and we all kind of line up in the kitchen, and it feels like a catered event. There's 16 of us, but we've never actually worked together, but because they've catered for years and I've catered for years, it's just like this kind of system where the plates go up, and we have a whole, and then we sit over dinner, and I always chat with my uncle about he ran catering halls all over. He was at the Fox Hollow and Tavern on the Green, so he has a very different experience, and it's really fun because at first I do off premise, so it's I have to bring my kitchen with me and remember something as silly as a spoon, and in the catering hall everything's there, and it's more production. I have a lot more people that have to kind of come together to create this, and so anyway, we always talk about it, and he would always kind of tell his stories, and for a while I would be like, no, it's different, you don't understand, he'd be like, you have to have the same menu. I'm like, no, you don't, custom catering, and but over the years, the more I've listened to him, the more I find things that it worked, and I could make it work, and they can really put on good shows in catering halls, and roll carts out. And so this year, my uncle comes once a week, and we just kind of talk, and I take any ideas I can get that I think I can implement to make my catering company just a little more interesting and unique with like old. I mean, I'm talking the 80s, prime time. It's not that old. But yeah. I learned a lot from my family, so I'm grateful for that.
Excellent, excellent. I know that train was trying to drown you out when you started, but.
It just made me talk louder, so that's not how it works.
So Allissa, you have traveled to New Zealand and Australia and learned from the winemaking practices. How do they differ from the North Fork of Long Island? Like, what are some things that they do that you can take away from that, and what are some things that they do that could never apply to the North Fork? I mean, besides climate, you know, I mean, as far as taste and, you know, the way wines are produced. What's different and what do you take away from those?
Well, again, it is the difference of learning different grape varietals and how they grow in the different regions. And just because we have the opposite climates, being able to go and experience it. But a lot of the like similar techniques with just general like sanitation practices, and when you have red grapes coming in and how they're treated with like punching down the fermenting on the skin. So there's a lot of similarities in that regard, but it was great because I didn't go to school for winemaking, so having that hands-on experience, especially when I went to New Zealand in 2015, it was back-to-back from my first harvest here. So where at home I wasn't so comfortable, I was getting to learn the ropes on just general like winemaking techniques. By going abroad and doing the double vintage, it just really solidified how to do the basic techniques.
And they probably have higher volume, right?
Yes, so it completely changed the scenery. So at Premium, our largest vintage was 1,600 tons. At Borghese this past year, we brought in 23 tons. When I was in New Zealand, I worked at a very large winery. It was called Villa Maria, and we had a low yielding vintage of 17,000 tons. Then in Australia 2 years ago, we had about an average yield of about 10,000 tons. So at Borghese, everything is hand-picked. In the summertime, spending almost every day out in the vineyard, just pulling leaves to expose clusters, so the wind can let them breathe and the sun can hit the grapes. Whereas in the Southern Hemisphere, when you have these massive vineyards, it's not just one vineyard that the grapes are coming from. People are just growers, so you'll see acres upon acres of different grape varietals. So it's a much grander scale, which is really cool to be able to learn how to work in a fast-paced environment and then bring those skills to be able to really hone in and make it a love of the labor, so labor of love.
That's excellent, excellent. Frank,
Yes.
where does the name for your farm, Bhumi, come from? B-H-U-M-I. If, I don't know, whoever's in East Hampton, Amagansett area is familiar with your farm stand, or
My old farm stand.
This is your old farm stand.
Closed it, yeah. I moved across the street.
Ah, that's right, that's right. Where does the name come from?
It's Sanskrit for Goddess Earth,
Ah,
Mother Earth, yeah.
excellent, excellent. So, you started, what is the percentage of the food that you donate to, from the information I got, you donate food to New York Common Pantry and the Bronx's POTS, part of the solution acronym?
Yeah.
What percentage of your food do you donate, and are you able to sustain your farm?
I would donate all my food. If someone said, what's your operating budget, and I gave them a number and they gave me that check, I would donate all my food. The only reason I sell up any portion of my food is to fund the nonprofit side of the business. So it depends, like I have CSA programs, so that's one way we raise money. We do the farmer's market, that's another way we raise money. But those are like, that's a good way to do outreach. We've had families that have been with us for 6 years. I've had little kids grow up to like weeders, which is good because it's free labor. But the goal of it is to give away all of it. We just haven't gotten there yet. So in terms of percent, it's hard to give you a number because it changes every year, but the minimum is 50. Because every CSA we charge twice as much as it should be. So if it's only $50 a week, we'll charge $100 a week, and we'll take that extra $50 and bring that to the pantry.
So how many CSAs do you have that is able to sustain what you can donate?
I don't have enough CSAs to sustain the farm.
Uh-huh.
We do another, so I created another business called the Corporate CSA, where I'll set up a farm stand in an office. So J. Crew is a client of mine, so every other week I go to J. Crew's corporate office and I set up a beautiful farm stand, and the J. Crew sponsors part of it, and then the employees of J. Crew do a CSA there, and so we do more creative ways like that to raise money. But in my part of the Hamptons, at Megantic, you have Amber Waves, which is a great farm, you have Quail Hill, which is a great farm, and you have a Balsam, which is a huge great farm, and Boomy is a small great farm, I like to say. And so in terms of CSA, there's a little bit of saturation. You know, our CSA is slightly different because we deliver, and we let the members pick exactly what they want in the box, so it's pick to order, which is great, but the offset is it's twice as much. So if you can't fit that into your budget, or if our mission isn't your mission, then they'll go to another fund.
Cool, thank you. So Jennilee, you also run North Fork Roasters, right? The coffee company?
Yes.
Which you were roasting coffee in your garage at some point?
Yeah, it's a side hobby.
So tell us about North Fork Roasters and where we can find it and what it's like, and have you traveled to learn about coffee roasting and growing?
Yeah, so North Fork Roasting is located in Southold. It's actually directly across the street from Grace and Grit, so we just kind of run back and forth all day long and get more coffee and cook more and then get more coffee. But I started roasting in 2007. When I took the job at Love Lane Kitchen, there was a little roaster in the corner, and the original owner of Love Lane's idea was that we would roast coffee, and you know, it would stink up the town and people would want to come in and get eggs, and it worked. Love Lane is still there and it's booming. The coffee roaster is not, and it was just this little Diedrich that was in the corner. But I got really into coffee because the owner had sent me to Seattle to my first coffee convention, and I've been going to coffee conventions since then. I've taken roasting courses, and I've spent hours upon hours learning how to steam milk, which is crazy. Yeah, it's a science. Yeah, but after a while, it's like, you know, they say peeling back an onion. The more you learn about it, and you know, you just want to keep going. And so eventually, I think it was in 2009, I bought my own roaster, and it was a bit bigger. And my mom was generous enough to give me her garage. So I set it up in my garage and roasted coffee, wholesaled it, and for years until eventually I met my partner Jess, who is back there. And yes, and we opened North Fork Roasting Company in 2015, and Valentine's Day of 2015, and then that summer we brought our roaster, and now people get to see it instead of just my neighbors. So, but my neighbors would come over and be like, "What do you got?" You know, so I think they miss it. But yeah, so that's how that began, and it's been a great journey, and I love it very much, and I consider it a passion and a hobby. So if anybody wants to talk coffee later, there you go.
There you go. And it's available at Amber Waves and Millhouse, Cavagnola's cheese shops out here. I don't know if any of you have tried their coffee. It's excellent.
Thank you.
So Allissa, I think you're the second or third English lit major that we've had up on this stage, like in the last couple of weeks. We had the owner of Love Lane Kitchen now. She was also an English literature major. So how did you get from that to where you are now? Is there, like, how can you use your education with what you do now?
I went to college up in Newport, Rhode Island, called Salve Regina University, and I went in not really having an idea what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't know what I wanted to major in. I just went to college because I was supposed to, and when I first went to Newport, I absolutely fell in love with the city. I was like, I belong here right now. When I was taking my classes, English literature was my I was just very drawn to all of the courses. In high school, I just grew up reading a lot, and then my professors were just wonderful, like a little eccentric, but very passionate about everything that they would teach. I would take a medieval literature and like the Canterbury Tales, and my one professor would come in and she was like very theatrical and be like, "Hello class," and everybody would pick a person and we would just go on and talk about it. So the teachers are really what helped draw me into that major. Going into it, I did know that I did not want to become a teacher nor a writer, but I needed to get a degree because that's why I go to college. So I graduated in 2011, and when I came back home, I was like, oh, well, what's next? And so being in the heart of wine country, I got a job working in the tasting room like I had mentioned, and for being 21, it was great. I was being paid to socialize and talk to people and get to learn about wine, and it was when we had the lecture series and the tours of the winemaking is where I was like, okay, this is a good fit for me. And right now for Borghese, I'll help with like just our email blasts, and we have a monthly email being like behind the vines with Allissa. So I feel comfortable in my writing and my speaking skills, so.
Good.
Yeah.
Frank, so I have a quote here from you. You enjoy teaching children about food, and the quote I have from you is, "Food is the core of a lot of health issues, so food can be the core of a lot of healing." Tell us about what you do to help children. And
So we had a nuanced shift from years 1 and 2 to years and then beyond. When we first, I say we, but it's actually I just hate saying I am the only farmer. We made a shift and decided that the goal of a farmer is not to grow food, the goal of a farmer is to feed people. And so we started looking at our farm differently. Most metrics are yield per foot or pounds per foot, and we think that's actually the wrong way to grow. We think the proper metrics are the amount of nutritive value out of each acre, at each foot, each vegetable. So we switched, we became certified organic, and certified organic is just a growing protocol. It doesn't mandate any sort of ground care, any sort of care for the soil, which is the base of everything. So you could be actually a pretty great organic farmer and pass all the tests, but your soil could actually offer no nutritive value to your plants. So everything starts with the soil, and that's how we start to grow. We are one of 34 farms selected now across the country to test this tool called a spectrometer. And the spectrometer will allow us to send samples into the lab. It'll check your polyphenols, your antioxidants, and your nutrient value of your vegetables. Soon, if everything goes well, there'll be a tool that will be able to make available to all consumers, which will shoot that data onto their mobile phones. So when you go to the supermarket, you can shoot onto a cabbage and say, this cabbage is a beautiful piece of styrofoam. And when that happens, consumers will stop buying that piece of styrofoam, and they'll start shooting it on vegetables that are grown properly. And that, hopefully, will shift the demand from the consumers and teach farmers or make farmers grow differently. Because what we're putting in our systems now is terrible. It does nothing, not all of it, but most of it come from conventionally grown vegetables. Does nothing for us to help us. There's new diseases every day that you see. There's depression is epidemic, diabetes, all this comes from food, and all food comes from soil. So, that's my answer.
That's good. Okay, tell us about, Jennilee, tell us about, how old were you, if I may ask, when you opened your own luncheonette, Bonnie Jean's, while you're still roasting coffee beans? And that seems like a pretty big deal to open a restaurant.
Yeah, it's because I was so young. I was not scared of anything. I just turned 27, or actually I was 26 still, but it was like, a few weeks apart. But yeah, I just turned 20, no, I was 26. Time flies by. I don't know. I have a really hard time dating things, but I've been really busy, so, but
Does the restaurant still exist
yeah,
somewhere?
yeah, right.
Still Bonnie
right,
Jean's?
It's not Bonnie Jean's anymore. But it's directly behind the coffee shop.
Mhm.
So while I had Bonnie Jean's, I had it for 3 years, and it was a great experience. But I was catering out of it. I started Grace and Grit out of it. I also was doing the coffee wholesale, and for some reason I agreed to help open another restaurant in Greenport. So I was just a little too busy, and it's just by my nature. Like I like to do things, and things excite me, and I love providing work for people. I love providing opportunities, so it makes me always want to grow in that way, because I have a lot of people around me that they believe in the stuff that we do, and you know, I find that once people start to, especially with coffee or cooking, like once they start to learn a little bit, you can see people's passions ignite, and they just want to know more. And I've seen people make careers and move into, you know, this industry, or even just basic life skills, like knowing how to cut an onion, and it's just very rewarding. So I'm always looking to kind of have an umbrella for people to live under if they want to, until they're ready to go move on. So, but I had too many balls in one air, or too many balls in the air at that time, and ultimately decided to sell the restaurant. And I was I had leased the building next door, which is now Northwark Roasting, and it just sat on it for 3 years before we even started to make progress in opening it as a coffee shop. And it wasn't until I decided to let go of the restaurant that it was, you know, okay, we can do it. So yes, so we opened the coffee and relocated the catering, and now I only do 2 things. So.
Yeah. So Grace and Grit, the catering company, which
Yeah.
is off-site catering.
Correct, yeah.
What are some of the specialties? I tried to find a menu
Yeah.
on the website and I couldn't find anything.
Well,
So
my uncle knows now. It's custom menus, okay? No. We do, we really truly do. We actually did a series of pop-ups, not this past winter, the one before, where we experimented with all different cuisines. We did Indian, we did Thai food, we did Mexican. We just tried to like hit everything, because from each of those pop-ups that we did, which the community loved, because we don't have a lot of variety of ethnic cuisine right now in our area, but we would find something that's found its way onto a menu. A lot of times we have, you know, brides and grooms who they have their own cultural history, and you know, or they've traveled around the world and they want to do hors d'oeuvres from each country, or a grandmother's recipe. And you know, some of our greatest stuff has been when we've stretched ourselves, instead of just saying like, well, this is your menu, no options, like this is what it is, or just pick these 3. And for us, we really like to be creative and have it kind of showcase our client rather than just what we think is good. We want to be able to pull some of their, you know, history, so people can really see their personality in the food too. So, especially for weddings.
yeah, oh yeah, excellent, thank you. So Allissa, you, I guess you started off working at Martha Claire at their tasting room.
Yes.
You've also worked at Lieb Cellars.
Mhm.
She was a believer. Who gets that? Anybody young enough to get a believer? I thought that was so funny.
I thought that was Justin Bieber.
But usually, but if you're at Lieb Cellars, you can be a believer too, apparently. And now you're at Borghese, which used to be the Hargrave Vineyard Winery. Do you find the community of winemakers competitive or collaborative?
I find them very collaborative. Like I said, because of the winemaker, he helped me get to where I am today. He was once my mentor, now I call him my friend. Being at Premium Wine Group for 4 years was an absolute blessing, because it's a custom crush facility. It means that vineyards or winemakers that don't have the machinery to make their wine bring all their grapes to Premium, and there they get crushed, fermented, aged, and bottled. So whether a winery has their own winemaking facility or not, at one point or another, every winemaker and a lot of vineyard managers too pass by those doors. and I always said hi, always introduced myself. I'm a pretty outgoing person, so I knew a lot of the people beforehand and just made closer connections afterwards. I'm Monday through Friday at Borghese, and anytime we have special events, but I also work 1 day a week at Peconic Cellar Door. Two of my girlfriends opened up a tasting room there in July of 2017, Allie Shaper and Robin Epperson McCarthy. So through them, as also being women in winemaking, when I first traveled abroad, Robin had done like 5 vintages abroad. So she was really helpful, just teach me kind of what I should be prepared for. My coworkers at Premium who had been in the industry for like 10, 15 plus years were like, okay, like this is really how you should get ahead. Like this is how you make yourself a little bit like stand out. So anybody across the board, I have gone to like done cellar tours, checking out the different wineries, and it's a really beautiful community to be a part of. So, and again at Premium, if like somebody ran out of a dry good product and they're like, oh no, I need this right away, especially during harvest when everything happens so quickly and has to get done, you can like maybe borrow something from another winery and then pay it back when you're doing your next order. So
17,000 tons of grapes.
Exactly.
What are the attitudes, yours and maybe some fellow vineyards and wineries, about, you know, those bachelorette tours and the big tour buses and limousines that come through and take, like I know Contra Costa and Greenport won't even allow any limousines or bachelorette parties or, you know, tour buses.
At Borghese, we don't allow that either. It really, more often than not, kind of takes away from the wine, like the wine tasting experience, because a lot of the time the buses and limos, the people on the buses will be picked up from up island, be drinking since 10 a.m., come to the vineyard. They're not there to taste wine and to try wine. They're there just to get a buzz and move on to the next place. So there's some, like for Leap Cellars, for example, they have 2 tasting rooms. They're location on Oregon Road, and then they have a separate location called Bridge Lane Tasting Room, where for that tasting room they'll allow buses and limos, but Leap Cellars, they don't allow the big groups to come in. So they're lucky to have 2 spaces to accommodate both. But I think more often than not, tasting rooms would like to get away from them, just so that it can be more about the enjoying of the wine, and hopefully like when you have a pourer behind the bar, can learn exactly how the wine is made, what are their techniques, and just little things that that make the experience better.
That actually make it a wine tasting.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so yeah, I see some of those shows, The Real Housewives or at Duck and it's just a bit
much
with the crew and everything like that. And yes, they are getting too drunk as well.
It really takes away from it.
Frank,
Yes.
what did you learn about yourself after your career change?
Career change is pretty brutal, actually. I mean, you go from New York City, where there's something all day long. My last job was on a trading desk, so like I had people 2 feet away from me. I took the subway to work. That's like 6 inches away from me. I lived in a New York City apartment where through the wall there was a family here and a family, like a group there. So when you switch to farming and being a single farm, you spend 14 hours a day alone or 16 hours a day alone. It was a huge adjustment for me, and you have to, I guess the city's kind of like an addiction, like all the stimulus, and you have to start untelling yourself all the stories you told yourself about what you need. So that was my first year. My first winter out here was brutal, actually. We used to have snow back then, so like Quail Hill had a 10-foot snowdrift in front of it, and yeah, the first one was. Pardon me?
You were trapped with all the snow.
I felt like I made a terrible decision, and then it's just there's this book called The Single Straw Revolution, I think, or The One Straw Revolution, and the writer is a Japanese farmer. He says we we farm to create perfect people, and I'm not saying I'm a perfect person, but you give yourself a lot of time to figure out why you've done the things you've done in your life, and most of us repeat the same mistakes over and over. So when you're weeding a 300-foot bed of vegetables by hand, because we farm like the way you said you guys farm, everything's by hand, it's such a monotonous task that you actually stop thinking about the physical aspect of it, and your mind could wander wherever it wants, and most of the time, hopefully, it wanders inward. And through that, you end up investigating for hours at a time all the things that you've done wrong and you'd like to change. So that's it. And the one thing about farming, which is really special, is if you screw up year one, you have a chance at again next year. I don't grow any perennials because I don't own my land. So it's like you live that season, you think about it, and then you get to relive it again and make changes.
What did you, the first season that you farmed,
Yeah.
did you have failures, successes? You know, I think I read some story, the crows came and like all you had left was one melon.
Yeah, that was a sad day too.
was that your first year? You probably learned a lot, your first harvest.
I knew nothing. I came from not a farm family. I had two base faiths. One, seeds grow with or without me, so I didn't really have to teach a seed to grow. And secondly is I thought I could learn anything, like short of be a professional athlete. I feel like most careers I could learn. So those two things together, I was like, all right, it'll be tough. And it was tough, but it gets easier every year. But I would say like one specific mistake is I couldn't decide what to grow, so I grew everything. And I heard you applause for Italian. I come from a Sicilian household, so I grew a lot of escarole, year one. And everyone thought I was selling them bitter lettuce. So I don't grow escarole anymore.
I love escarole.
Yeah, I have like a little small patch for myself.
So, Jennilee, do you have a tasting room or tasting space somewhere that you did these pop-ups in?
Yes, that is across from the coffee shop. We have a little commissary, and which is where all of our cooking happens. And then in front of it, we have a couple of nice farm tables, and we built it out really because we bring couples in, and we'll do their entire wedding menu, and they'll be able to sit and taste everything. And we decided that, again, not this winter, but the winter before, we decided to open it up to the public and do these pop-ups. And we did them like Thursday, Friday nights, but now we do them in different places, and we're kind of expanding our kitchen because we just want to cook more.
And you had like a fried chicken one and a
we had
burger
we had a fried
one.
chicken night. We did, we still do the burger night right down the road at a place called Taps and Quirks.
It's a good name for it.
Yeah. It goes well with the burger.
Yes.
But yeah, the pop-ups were fun.
Excellent. Allissa, I understand, because, before we all, everybody's moving around the room, can you tell us about the 2018 steel fermented Chardonnay? This year, the first wine that is 100% you.
Yes,
Tell us about that.
Really excited to share with whoever wants to have after the panel here. The 2018 Steel Fermented Chardonnay is the first wine that I have been completely involved with from bud break until bottle. Like I mentioned, I've been working in winemaking for about 5 years now, but now being at Borghese, we're very small. We have 80 acres of property, but only about 20 acres under vine. And again, like we mentioned, everything is done by hand. So I started there last May, and right around the time, like same week after, all the buds were beginning to break. So to have seen the little buds each week grow a little bit taller until the clusters were forming, until the fruit was ripening, and then gathering a team for harvesting, it's just been an incredible process. And then having it harvested, every day checking on the fermentation.
Sounds like raising a child.
A lot shorter time though. And just like during the fermentation, remembering we picked it at, we picked the fruit at when it reaches a certain sugar level at bricks. And about halfway through its fermentation, it's like starting to get dry, it's not that sweet, but just the aromas filling the cellar are just something that I'll never ever forget for the rest of my life. And then trying the final product about 8 months later and being able to share it with people, it's like, oh my gosh, I helped create this. It's beautiful. And I mean, I'm pretty biased, but I think it's tasting fantastic.
Who does the labels for the winery? Do you have an, I mean, I haven't even looked at it yet. Do you have an artist? Do you
We do
photographs?
not. We, like, for them to
The
be
crest,
produced.
the family crest?
Yeah, so Borghese Vineyard is owned by the Borghese family, which they have roots in like the Italian royalty. If you're ever in Rome, the Borghese Gardens, it's the same family.
Wow.
Yeah, so the former owner, it's now owned by Giovanni Borghese. His father was an Italian prince. He doesn't like to talk about it, he's very low key, but yeah, they have Italian royalty on the North Fork.
Excellent. That's good. They can afford to sustain the winery.
Yep,
Right? That's good.
exactly.
They have some money behind it. Frank, how important do you think it is to, because there have been farmers up here and chefs and, you know, people who say it doesn't matter if it's organic, it just should taste good. What is your attitude towards organic farming? How important is it?
So I think organic farming is important because it puts a scaffolding on how bad the produce could be. Like, you know, if you are buying organic, you're not getting any man-made pesticides, herbicides, or fungicides, and that's good. We shouldn't ingest those things. But in terms, I'm assuming everyone eats for a few reasons, but one of them is for sustenance. It's on the hierarchy of needs: food, clothing, and shelter. So organic farming is great. I've been certified. I've jumped through the hoops. However, it doesn't take us all the way there. It doesn't take us to where we need to be. And I mentioned this earlier quickly, but when I look at my requirements to be organic compliant, it doesn't mention anything about soil health. It tells you some things you have to do, but it doesn't say, like, there's no measurement for organic matter, there's no measurement for bacterial activity, there's no measure from fungal activity. And all these things are important, and like we're doing these things for ourselves as humans. We're drinking probiotics, kombucha, we're taking probiotics, we're eating yogurt. So your gut is to the human just as the soil is to the plant. So it would be real remiss to think you have healthy plants. You can't have healthy plants if you don't have healthy soil. And organic protocol does not mandate healthy soil. They do certain things that are logical, like if you spray chemicals, you're going to kill the soil life, right? So that's great. But we could all do a little more. So my farm has gone that direction. We're a progressive nutrient-dense farm, and we're putting protocols in place to measure that. The bricks measurement that you mentioned is a way, but even if you do a soil test, I'm sure most of you have pools, and a lot of times they say like your chlorine is not bioavailable or something like that. So you could have the most healthy soil, and you do everything you can to get all those nutrients into the plant, but sometimes they don't. So you take sap analysis, and you test the sap, so you know for in fact that the things are getting from the soil to the plant. And you know, short of that, you don't really know. You know how you feel, you know how it tastes, you know how the plant looks. You know, like, sick plants have pests, healthy plants don't have pests. So if you have an infestation, you probably have unhealthy plants. So I guess my long answer was that, and my short answer.
If I were a pest, I would prefer the healthy plant.
If you were a pest, you couldn't eat the healthy plants. Because everything alive has a defense mechanism. If you have a healthy plant, you could turn sugars to proteins, protein to fats, fats to lipids, and the beetles that we have the biggest problems with here can't pierce that material. So if you could nurture a plant and usher it to the optimal health the bugs will go to your neighbor's house. Yeah.
Unless everybody's doing the same thing.
And that's the hope. Everyone should have your own garden. You should ask those questions. You know, the most healthy fruit is not the most beautiful fruit. So smell it, ask your farmers questions, ask what they do for pests, see if they're friendly to bees, what their soil protocol is. This is all on you guys. Like, we could do our thing, and there's many ways to the mountaintop, but if you're eating to be healthy, sorry, I'm taking a lot of time, but there's basically a fork in the road in front of all of us. Like, you could do the quick fix and buy the most beautiful tomato from the closest farm stand for the best price, or you could take, and that will lead to probably problems down the road, or you could like do a little legwork and maybe make your short-term life a little more difficult, but you'll live a longer, happier life. The end. Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to open up the room to questions from the audience for Allissa, Jennilee, and Frank. I see, okay, first hand up, yes, you. Sorry to point.
No, that's okay. Do you, I think it was me, right?
Yes.
Do you spray your grapes?
We do. The past 2 years, the grapes were in the vines in a poor state. We have a consulting vineyard manager. His name is Sam McCullough. He's the vineyard manager for Lens Winery. He's been in the industry for over 30 years, and he's incredible. He's worked with Cornell Cooperative Extension on research. So we've really just like put our trust in Sam to guide us on what needs to be sprayed. Our hope is to become a part of Long Island's sustainable wine growing, but Sam isn't a part of that. And like I said, right now we're like, okay, Sam, if that's the best thing, we want our vines to be healthy and producing beautiful fruit. Like 2018 was the first year that we've been able to produce a like red wine in the past few years. So, but because of that, we've made some like incredible rosés. We have a white Pinot Noir, so we still make some great wine.
Yes.
If I don't use pesticides and fungicides on my soil, won't my soil be healthy?
This is for me, I assume. Yeah. If you don't use pesticides and fungicides for your soil, will your soil be healthy? No. I mean, it could be, but those things could also be mutually exclusive. You have to feed your soil. You could get, what can you get? It needs humus, it needs organic matter, it needs compost. If you have a good composting protocol, you'll get all the live bionome down there. But yeah, you could never spray and still have unhealthy soil if you don't feed the soil what it wants. And also, the plant, and also if you work the soil too much, you burn that all off. So if you're a heavy tractoring farm, or if you use like a dirt devil, whatever that thing is, weasel, what's it called? Weasel. Too often, you'll kill everything that the worms feed on, and all the bacteria. Pardon me?
I like my weasel.
Well, just don't be too aggressive with it. You can do some, but yeah, you don't want to overwork the soil.
Well, I have a shady backyard, so I can't really grow much.
too
I
bad.
can grow mint, that's about it. Okay. Yes, Claude Budere in the back.
What was your favorite Joseph Canterbury tale? It's been a long time since I read it, but now you got me thinking about it. You have one?
Off the top of my head, I don't, but I have like my notebook still from college, and I don't
So
remember.
I'll go to the winery and I'll ask you in like 3 weeks, and you'll.
Please do, please do, yes.
I'm trying to even remember some of them. There was...
Reeves, Miller.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I forget.
that was a classic.
I loved it. I remember reading it
He's
in
a
high
teacher.
school.
He's a teacher.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I remember reading it in high school and revisiting it in college. I was like, oh, I know this. And then it was the professor who would come in, and like each class she would be like one of the different characters. So it was so
My
fun.
story of the Middle Ages.
Yes.
Medieval times. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah.
Yes, the Italian corner.
Sicilian.
Sicilian.
Do all of the wines on the North Fork, are they all made with sulfites?
A lot of them are, but I don't know each vineyard's winemaking practices.
Don't grapes naturally have their own sulfites anyway? in
They
them?
do, yeah, they
Yeah.
naturally are
So there's no
produced.
such thing as sulfite free.
But also white wines do have more sulfites than red wines, which is a common myth. People think that red wine has more.
I was victim to that myth.
I heard that too, that's interesting. I see a hand, yes.
Me? Yeah.
Yes, you. Sorry.
This is for you. What was, when you first started out, what was the most rewarding, either flower, vegetable, fruit that you saw grow?
A radish, because it was the first thing up, and I was like, but yeah, definitely, it was like 21 days up and down. I was really happy.
Success.
But since then, because I am Sicilian also, I spend a lot of acreage on tomatoes and tomatoes.
And how many acres do you have now?
So it changes all the time, but there's 2 acres in East Hampton, and then there's a lot of acreage in Sagaponic, but we're not going to farm it all because we're trying to build up the soil.
Right, right.
So it's probably like 2 and 3 or 2 and 4 or something.
And
like
do you still have CSAs available for this coming season?
Yeah, I don't actually. I actually don't market very well. I don't know. You were on the website. I'm not
It
self.
was pretty good. It was better than Borghese's website.
We're working on it.
There said under construction is a low bar. I'm not that promotional really, or self-promotional, so there's always CSAs available. It's all like word of mouth. I don't send anything out. My Instagram feed is just photos of tomatoes. But if someone wants something, they could just find me. I don't have a sign for my, that's how I don't have a sign on my farm.
I love the sign on the little yellow stand on Pantago Road. That's
Yeah.
just so cute.
The stand was beautiful, but when you were telling the story of the limos coming up to drink wine and not pay attention to anything, that's how I felt about my stand. It was a blogger's paradise. And they would take photos in front, they would not buy a thing. And they'd go to their car, change clothes, take another photo, and pretend they were there twice.
And it was so cool.
And I was like, this is not the point of this farm. So.
Yeah, I think I saw it in Hampton's magazine with some models. No, I have
No, that's true. It was on Goop.
Goop, it was
Yeah.
Goop, exactly. Oh my God, there you go. Questions? Joanne, this is the first time you've never had a question?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, well, actually,
I know you're paying attention.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
was,
calling you.
Frank, you sound like kind of talking a little bit like the Chinese, that food is medicine. Do you go by that food is medicine?
I read the China study, and I believe food is medicine. I don't know if the Chinese monopolized that thought. It's probably been around
Yeah, it's
all cultures, but yeah, I think I've said it 3 or 4 times. I come from a Sicilian family where food was everything. You made up at the table, like everything revolved around good food, and I guess that's where all this came from. And yeah, I do believe that food, from that quote, current food policy and current food available is the cause of a huge amount of our emotional issues, health issues, and yes.
Does anybody remember when, I guess it was under Reagan, David Stockman declared for school public lunches that ketchup was considered a vegetable and got away with it? Like that was policy? That was, I'm not sure it's gotten much better.
It's pizza
But
now.
this one. Pizza's the full vegetable?
Pizza's a serving of vegetables.
Only if it's
Really?
organic.
Oh my goodness. So tomato paste, ketchup, almost
Yeah.
the same thing, just a little bit more.
It's
Amazing.
probably mostly corn syrup, though.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share with you, and I appreciate all of your information. It's been so marvelous. Thank you. This is the first time I've ever been to one of the talks. But we have a 1-acre farm in Bridgehampton called the Good Shepherd Farm. And the first year that I started, there were 2 people who've since left, but they were in charge, and they sprayed a lot of pesticides, and even when no one was there, they sprayed a lot of Roundup because they didn't like weeding.
What are they
And
growing there? Is it a-
when they left, different people took over, and we're a co-op, so everybody sort of has a say. And some people were really adamant about no spraying at all. And a lot of people thought that was almost ridiculous. But the truth is, we've been sticking to that. The second year, the produce was so much better. We're fertilizing the soil. We're making compost. We're composting, fertilizing. This is the 4th year now. I think I'm starting my 5th year. And the produce every year has been much more bountiful. The crows aren't getting the tomatoes anymore. We're putting, like the people in Sicily do, we're putting the basil next to the tomatoes. We're interspersing the flowers for the pollinization. It's not really rocket science, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But the benefits are amazing, and they're right in front of you to see the difference. So anybody who would like to visit the Good Shepherd Farm, it's right behind the Catholic Church in Bridgehampton. And it's beautiful. It's just beautiful being there and being part of this co-op. It's only 1 acre, but we feed 20 farmers, and the surplus goes to the Sag Harbor Food Pantry.
You get a lot of good food off 1 acre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we love flowers, so we've increased the flowers. I love bringing home flowers.
Yeah.
Thank you. I saw,
Yeah,
yes.
Great
Yes, sir.
question. We live vineyards all around us, and I'm very curious. I was a farmer, grew up on a farm, and I couldn't wait to leave it. 16, goodbye, I'm out of there. It was nasty and dirty and stunk, and hard work from 5 to midnight. But I'm interested in the grapevines. What's going on with are they trimming grapevines in the fall, and then you must have to thin the buds in the spring?
So right now, this past winter, there's 3 of us total, and who take care of everything throughout the year. Again, for about 18 acres to be precise. And during the winter, the vines are dormant. So after last year's harvest, we have shoots that are growing that those get pruned back, and we'll save like 1 shoot. There's either cane pruning or spur pruning. So a cane pruning is when you're driving down, you see a vineyard that you have the trunk and about 2 arms that go off, and those get tied down to the fruiting wire. Or you can have spur pruning where you have the canes that are tied down, and the shoots that had come up, you just prune those back. So you have it could be a couple years old growth. Wolfer State Vineyard here on the South Fork, they do a lot of spur pruning, and they like gnarly spurs, which look like beautiful. But so spurs or cane pruning, and then end of April, early May is when bud break typically occurs, and that is seen if you see dandelions in the vineyard, because the ground needs to warm up to about 50 degrees before the vines can start producing their buds and the buds start swelling. Then in mid-August is when the grapes go through veraison. So you have these little shoots that start popping up during bud break and continue to grow. These hard little green berries that it doesn't look like there's much going on, but through their lag phase, there's nothing going on the outside, but on the inside, they are developing their seed. So mid-August, they go through veraison, which means the color change and to ripen. So that's when the sugars start accumulating. And harvest will be in mid-September through mid-October. Grapes for sparkling wine are always picked first because they have a higher acidity and a lower sugar content, Brix content. And then red grapes will be harvested last, unless you're doing a dessert wine, because you want the Brix to be in like the mid-20s or so before you harvest for the red wine.
You're so smart, Allissa.
How about one more question before we move on to Rick's Delicious Foods and Delicious Wines? Yes?
Jennilee, I was just curious, do you work with a lot of different farmers or other producers on, in your catering and
Yeah. I mean, being in South, we're lucky to be surrounded by a number of farms. Specifically, we do work most of our stuff with Deep Roots Farm, which we could walk to it, and we do. But Michelle is our farmer, and she meets with us before the season. She'll talk to us throughout each season and actually kind of line up what she's going to plan. For us, we've been really focused on that over the last few years because it's really hard with catering because, you know, it's one thing to be able to buy local and cook for yourself or your family, but you know, sometimes we have events of upwards of 200 people, so trying to source from one farm, I mean, you would probably kill me if I needed one. You know, I get 60 pounds of tomatoes, or maybe it'd be great, but
Make that phone call, see what happens.
yeah. But and it's not just the local farms too. You know, there's tons of oyster farmers, and you know, we took some of the fish off of our menu that we were offering to really try to stick to stuff that's going to be local. And it's really all a conversation, and we set the expectation with the client because, you know, maybe they want a certain fish, maybe they want halibut, but we don't know if that's the right time of year, so we might steer them somewhere else, or maybe, you know, with all the changes, everybody's adapting to the farming, but some seasons strawberries aren't here when they're supposed to be. Like there's no rule anymore, I feel like. So it's always a conversation with our farmers, and then we're just really the middle people that get to, you know, express that to the client and say, you know, hopefully, you know, we're working with our farmer and they should have kale at this time, or they should have strawberries, but it depends, you know, maybe we get a horrible storm and all the tomatoes burst early and, you know, tomato season's just done. That did happen last 1 year. It's so sad.
We're 2 weeks behind you guys.
What's that?
We're 2 weeks behind you guys.
Yep. Oh yeah?
So if tomatoes are over,
Right.
you have 2 more weeks down here.
So when you can't get them
There's
in
more temperate.
he has
Really?
Yep, wow.
There you
I've
go.
never
There
wandered
you go.
off my side of town.
Put those tomatoes on the ferries.
That's good to know. That's good to know. But yeah, it's a pleasure being able to, you know, you have your own craft that you focus on and you rely on. You know, I rely on Allissa to tell me what the quality wine is and what's going to pair well with my food, and you know, I would rely on him to tell me, you know, what the best produce is going to be at this time, and then I'm just the messenger, and I actually have the easiest job because as a chef, if they are growing and producing these great, you know, food and beverage, and I just have to really put it on the plate and smile. So grateful for you both.
And you do it so beautifully.
Thank you.
Do you find that customers, clients are asking more about locally sourced food?
Absolutely, yeah, and I've noticed it more and more over the years, and I've also noticed, because I've been catering for over 8 years now, but specifically with Grace and Grit for 8 years, and I've noticed a big change. People are willing to have less variety. They're more interested on where stuff's coming from, and they're also willing to not get too hung up on a specific dish. Because they want it to be local, they want it to be East End fare, and you know, we used to have to really push for that, and now it's more an expectation than anything else. So
That's good.
yeah.
And also, I just wanted to interject that talking about the community and using everybody's resources, it is such a, like, for the North Fork in particular, a beautiful community where everybody does really support each other, from the restaurants and the farmers and the beverage producers. So it's just an exciting time to be a part of it all, and just to make friends who just do some really cool things out here.
It's true.
Well, we are grateful to you guys for everything you do. Guys and gals.